Welcome to Roundtable Ops in Motion, where marketing, sales, and RevOps leader break down the systems, strategies, and data shaping modern GTM operations. Each episode brings you actionable insights, practical frameworks, and emerging trends, helping B2B teams stay aligned, efficient, and scalable. I'm Kawal, co-founder at Digital DI Consultants, joined by my co-founder Shiv. Welcome to next episode of Roundtable Ops in Motion. I'm Kawal, and today's episode we would be exploring B2B marketing, especially marketing operations and RevOps, and also diving into how the role of fractional CMO is evolving. And we're excited to be joined by Dave Watson, a seasoned marketer with over 3 decades of experience in B2B marketing and consumer entertainment marketing. He's currently a fractional CMO working across Europe and North America. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure being here.
Sure. So, Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. You got a lot of things there. I've been a marketing professional for the last 30 years in video games, sports, entertainment, internet, kind of the whole swath. Now I'm getting more into revenue operations. I've done that in both San Francisco Bay Area and also within Europe in Prague. And now I'm headquartered in Munich. And I'm a fractional CMO now. It allows me a little bit more freedom to work on different projects. And my current project right now is working with a company called Euphonic, which is kind of working with as a growth accelerator for revenue operators and growth marketers and the whole go-to-market stack and the whole go-to-market team. And in addition, on the side or maybe in the middle, I do some things with dyslexia and tutor in dyslexia and in those areas.
Nice.
Wonderful. Amazing, Dave. Great introduction. Quick question for you. What's your take on the evolution of marketing operations and RevOps, especially in the last probably 7 to 8 years? And also wanted to know, what do you think, what value do they bring to the table?
Yes, from marketing ops, or I use marketing operations and revenue operations. And I know sales operations do a little bit more different, but I use them kind of all interchangeably. But the complexity of the world is just grown exponentially. I mean, it used to be probably 7 years ago that you have 3 to 4, maybe 5, 6 systems. It's relatively simple and straightforward. And the role of RevOps and marketing ops is kind of this order taker, make sure the system's working and those areas. And now you see there's so much more complexity and it's so much wider. And you're talking 50 systems, 80 systems, 100 systems with everybody in the organization, involved in that kind of go-to-marketing team. I mean, it could be growth and revenue and sales and finance and IT. They're all kind of set around, and that's kind of shifted the role for the revenue operations from kind of being on the edge on the side to kind of really moving towards the middle. So the real kind of challenge now and the opportunity in RevOps is to move from kind of this order taker and firefighter to more, architect is a word, strategist, the center of growth is, but you've really moved kind of into the center where where you're really at probably the biggest opportunity to drive much more growth than you have possibly before.
Couldn't agree well.
Right.
The word is the architect. I kind of sum them up, calling them as architect.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of words going on. There's engineer, there's architect. I like to use the word accelerator because it's kind of like, are you looking back? Are you looking forward? And it's, who's designing? There is a lot of confusion. I mean, there's a lot of confusion in the area. And I mean, that's, how does a revenue operator define themselves? So,
right.
And how can you be both the architect and the strategist? Because that's really what you are. And I think from both the enterprise success and your personal success, that's the best place to be.
I agree more.
Yeah. I mean, strategist is like very important part of this because anything you do in operation, you have to plan your processes because working in the B2B agency environment, what I've seen is we deal with many clients when they come up, when we onboard them, when we start auditing the system, it's like, okay, we did this, everything we did, but still we are not getting what we want. But when you look into it and when you audit the system, you see like, okay, there are so many flaws in terms of strategies, how they build it, right? So there are so many automations that they have, they're all conflicting. And they have so many systems in there. They're getting data from 1 tool, 2 tools, 3 tools, and then they're all working still in silos. Some of them are not even connected. So you don't have the entire span of
tech stack that should be working towards driving the data and revenue at the end of the day. What you want is driving the pipeline and the revenue for the business outcome. But that does not happen if all of these four things like people, process, technology, data is connected. So I feel like that's the way most of the organizations should be thinking. But we are hoping to reach there one day. I mean, all of the organizations and the architectures and strategists and revenue engineers, whoever is working on this. But yeah, we still have few things to do. And we have to think holistically about it, right?
Yeah, I most certainly agree. I mean, that's kind of this. I come from, my history is more of like kind of traditional marketing and marketing strategy. Now you look at RevOps, and I would say marketing was kind of in the middle, but now it's kind of like from a large organization that's really using all of these systems who built the tech stack and what if you would call it MarTech stack or revenue stack. Now that becomes the center of kind of your organization, and how does that kind of run? And there's, I'm doing the strategy and I'm doing the strategy and I'm doing the strategy, and it's really it's a difficult. It's simple to talk about, it's simple to say, but actually executing it becomes the challenge and opportunity.
Right. So many overlaps.
Yeah.
Of course. So, I mean, Dave, as you understand, like storytelling. So it's very important when we onboard a client, when we talk to different people, like storytelling is very important in B2B marketing because there are so many things that's connected and, work together hand in hand. So how do you think, like, how can someone simplify something like the complex processes that we have in marketing operation, revenue operation, sales operation into something clear and concise narrative, and then translate into, actionable growth initiatives so that it drives the pipeline and the revenue and all of that? So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so a lot of the business, especially with revenue operations, is analytical. How are you getting this number and how are you getting that number? And the whole business is based off of those numbers. So storytelling, a lot of times gets, pushed to the side, and it's really you need both of those in balance. So it's always how do you kind of grab onto one item that'll get to people or those things. So for example, we were talking about how do you become from an order taker to kind of a growth architect or a strategist, or however you want to call it. And, and I kind of think about it as like nesting dolls. So you have like a nesting doll like this, right? And what you want to do is from a revenue operation person say, okay, I'm going to manage this, this nesting doll. So what does that mean? So you go, well, we have to start taking out the layers because it's a nesting doll. And so first, you're responsible for managing, the systems. So, this is your dashboard, and this is kind of like what you're really known for, those elements. But really, you break that one down, and then you get to what we were talking about before, is you get to this guy, and we'll say what this doll is really about the organization. How do you bring everybody together in terms of strategy, in terms of analytics, in terms of story, in terms of use and all that? So really, how do you manage people? So you have to be able to manage people. So great. Okay. So you manage people and you've done a great job there. You're known as the strategist and those elements. But then you get to the part that, hey, what we said is that your systems really don't talk to each other very well.
Yeah.
So when you've got your firefighting and frustration of dealing with people, but you've also got your firefighting and a lot of elements of when sync errors happen and all those elements, it's happening right here. So you have to figure out a way to solve that. And you have to so it's alignment. I know past podcasts have talked about alignment. So you have to get people alignment, but you actually have to get system alignment too. And that's not really thought of. I mean, it's thought of, but it's not really, attacked. And then you basically have like, well, yeah, now we have all this little data and we have different data. And it's like, I've got customer data and company data, and I've got all this data silos and data drift. And it's like, okay, I have to solve, that. And when you break that down, you get this little itsy bitsy guy, really tiny. And this is kind of the silent failures. This is really what's causing a lot of your problem. And it hurts you on the organization top with people. It's these silent failures, like the unknown unknowns. I mean, there's the known unknowns that take forever to find, that you're spending so much time firefighting. And then the unknown unknowns that you don't even know about because that whole thing is. So you have to break down all those areas. So this kind of story gives you a little bit more to hold on to rather than a large presentation with numbers. And then you can kind of build your numbers and your growth around there. So that's the importance of storytelling within the concept of every area, so we can show how we can go from RevOps to revenue architect or revenue growth.
Right. I think this was a nice demo for storytelling.
Couldn't agree more.
So you mentioned a little bit, but how do you think about the tech stack and how do you optimize the tech stack? Because that seems to be, I mean, that's kind of in this story, but how do you go about doing that?
Right. So I think I've seen, like, especially in the past decade, tech landscape has, undergone a massive shift, I would say. There's a huge growth and there are so many tools that's been added. Earlier, most of the organizations were operated with like siloed tools. So you have a CRM, you have an email automation tool, you have an analytical tool that gives you the basic reporting and analytics. But today we are looking at interconnected ecosystem that actually has a CRM, a marketing automation tool, a CDP, intent data platform. You have AI tools and many more other things that's connected. It depends on the organization, how complex the process in the business is. But the biggest change in my view, what I'm seeing is like we are moving from tool-centric to data-driven and revenue-centric thinking, right? It is no longer like tools that are working in isolation. Okay, I send these emails, metrics are here, fine. Now I'm going to send this data to the sales. They're going to talk to these customers and that's it. So that's no longer there, right? So we have data which is coming into the automation platform from different tools with the sync and integration. So all of these stacks are working together to drive the pipeline and the revenue up. Now, when we say this, I think the evolution is like new challenge that has been added to this space by the complexity and the stack bloating that we keep using these words a lot nowadays. So many teams have invested in a lot of tools and they are trying to use all of these tools, but they have not invested much into integration these tools so that the sync is working in between these tools and the governance and the adoption. So there are many processes that build in many of the organizations, but what happens is adoption fails many a times. So as a result of that, you can see there are many powerful tools that the enterprise companies have invested in, but they are being underutilized. So there are a few things that is already been in place and some of the organizations are trying to do it, like optimizing these processes. So I think first one is like validation. So time and again, they should be auditing these stack and see like if there are any redundancies of process, because the process keep evolving, teams are growing and the business is growing. So the requirements keep changing. So we have to ensure that all of these sync is working and the tool has a clear purpose tied to business outcome. The next one is again integration and data hygiene, which is very important because we are getting all of these data into system. But if these are not clean and standardized and not useful, then I think we are losing the trust on the data. So the team is not going to trust the data. And then process and adoption is, of course, very important because we are building all of these technologies for the team to use. And if we are not being adopted or not being used in the day-to-day activities, then it's really, really difficult. And finally, I would say the measurement and accountability. So every stack should be tied back to the performance, whether it is pipeline contribution, the conversion rate, or the ROI impact. Because optimization today is about simplifying, as you mentioned also, it's about simplifying the processes and how we can align between people, technology, data, and the processes, and see like entire stack should work harder and smarter for the business to drive that revenue outcome, whatever, the founders or the business executive have aimed for. That's what I feel about the tech stack growth.
And now you were talking about data and data hygiene, and there's a lot of, I mean, that's what we always talk about is like, what's good data and bad data? And I forget which guy it was before him, but I think it was one of these small guys, it's bad data, the data silos you have, it was breaking that down. From your perspective, how do you first structure the system to have good data? And then how do you maintain, quote, good data?
Sure. Well, that's a good one, Dave. Now, as you said, there are four main pillars of marketing operations or RevOps in general. And CRM data is definitely one of them. Well, what happens is the good CRM data is kind of a backbone of data operations. It kind of powers accurate reporting, reliable attribution, and also ensures that sales, marketing, and leadership are making decisions from a single source of truth. That's important, right? And without good CRM data, it's like even the best of the tools or best of the strategies will fall apart. And if you have a good CRM data, when it is complete, consistent, and actionable. And the fact is, teams will trust it for forecasting, pipeline reviews, and also campaign performance. And also there is minimal intervention when it across the systems. That's important. Adding to that, what's also important is it's ensuring that you keeping it way clearer on how do you do that, right? How do you keep the data clean and up to date is ensuring that you have a very clear data governance. You have a very predefined ownership of your data, right? That's a very missing element in most of the organizations. There is no one set of team or a person who's owning the data ownership. And the third one is you got to build the automated validation rules and ongoing audits. Audits is something, it's one of my favorite and important aspect. If you do not keep auditing your data on a regular basis, whatever work you might have done in the recent past, that goes for waste, right? It's important you keep auditing your data. And most important, right, it needs a RevOps mindset. It's all in the mindset. You got to treat your data as a managed asset, right? You cannot be treating it as a byproduct of activity. So considering all that, it's very important that you have a good CRM data that would eventually lead you to the way where you would want to be. Essentially is driving the revenue for the organizations, right? So that's one thing. So adding on to that, Dave, kind of off track with the topics that we have been discussing, can you tell us more about your role as a dyslexia tutor, right?
Oh,
and how are
yeah.
you involved with the community? Anything that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, most certainly. Yeah. So when I'm not thinking about the rev tech stack and the handoffs and how do you kind of make those handoffs efficient, yeah, my mind is kind of on dyslexia. And that kind of came from a personal standpoint that we found out during COVID. There was a lot of homeschooling or, working from home. And we discovered, my wife and I kind of thought, our daughter seems to have like what would be, it feels like it's dyslexia. I looked up Dr. Google. And Dr. Google kind of came back with like she had a lot of traits for dyslexia. And when we went to the school was that they kind of challenged that. And so we had kind of this, and we're in Munich, so we're not in the US, we're Americans in Munich. There's different views and different thinking about that. So, we eventually had her tested and we found out she had dyslexia. And then we were kind of like at this point of like, oh, okay, who do we talk to? There's not much of a community out here in Europe. And, where do we, kind of now what will be remediation? Where do we get training for her and skills progression and those kind of worries. And that kind of eventually led us to someone called Nazia Ansari, and she's with Inclusivity Education, and she's a big believer in Orton Gillingham, which is kind of the gold standard dyslexia approach to dyslexia. And as that was going on more and more, I got more involved. I've become now an associate in training for Orton Gillingham and becoming a dyslexia tutor, and then offering, like help to other parents of when this happens and what can go on, and here are the difficulties and how do you do it in Europe? Because when we looked to people, there was nothing in Europe. There was nothing in Orton Gillingham. I mean, this is all kind of centered in the UK, but it's a really challenging time for a parent because you want to do everything you possibly can for your child, and then how do you get it together? So that's how I got kind of involved in kind of this area of dyslexia. So thinking about dyslexia there, and like that was really difficult to find. And then obviously on the kind of how do you make a move from RevOps to Rev Architect or growth architects. Those are the two things I'm always kind of my mindset's on.
Well, one thing I can say for sure, Dave, you're doing the job wonderfully well. It's never easy to do what you love in terms of providing amazing services to the companies or your clients. At the same time, doing something for the community, especially knowing when there's a need people want, being there for them. It's amazing. So congratulations on that. I think you're doing an amazing job.
It. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry and happy for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dave, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. This is exactly what Ops in Motion is all about: learning, sharing, and evolving together. Thank you, Kawal, for your time. And I am sure we all had a great time together.
Most certainly.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was good. I think it went pretty well. Sure. Especially the later part. I think you're doing an amazing job. You got to listen to people's stories. It's when you talk to them, you understand some of the things that they're doing for themselves, for others as well. So you're doing great. Keep it up.
Most certainly. Well, I really appreciate you contacting me, and I'm sure we'll be in touch as this goes forward, and good luck with everything.
Certainly. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you. Bye now.
Yeah.